Hey y'all, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. This is the state of our garden after all of our many different attempts to take care of all of these invasive grasses. In our previous videos, we did everything from flame weeding to just regular weeding, and it's still this bad. So what our solution is this year to try and experiment with is to put some ground cover down inside the beds. And so far that is working great. I didn't record any of that. I had done that in a previous video whenever I put in the potatoes and also whenever I did my herb garden. I didn't want it to be too repetitive, but it is really fast to do, and so far we are really happy with it. Also, another little update. Last year, whenever we did our garden tour and harvest, we were doing a little experiment to see if we could overwinter some of our pepper plants in the house. And as you can tell, that did not go very well. And I wasn't the only one. I seen several people that tried this and we all had the same results. Now that we've got the ground cover down, we needed to add holes so we can plant all of our transplants. And whenever I did the potatoes, I was using a tiny little hand torch, and that took me for absolute ever. So Robert suggested that we use this bigger torch, but I was a little bit intimidated by it. So he said he was going to help me. And right now what we're doing is putting the holes in for our pepper plants. As you can tell, we already have got our sweet potatoes planted here, and I have found that sweet potatoes and peppers are great companion plants. So that's what we're going to do again. We're just going to put our peppers and sweet potatoes in this bed. And this bed is 4 foot by 16 foot. And in this bed alone, I am able to grow enough of peppers and sweet potatoes for our family of 4 for the year. So I am really excited that we are able to do that. I have learned in all of my years of gardening that variety really makes a big difference. And I'm going to be sharing some of the varieties in like my garden tours, and I have other videos where I go over the varieties, but I have found that that makes a big difference in production, and you can cram so much into a little space and get so much production out of it. And you don't need like these big acres or anything like that to grow enough of food for your family. Another thing with peppers is I do not grow the hot peppers anymore. We had an issue a few years ago where we were growing both the sweet peppers and the hot peppers, and I don't know if it's because we live in the South or what happened, but suddenly our sweet peppers became hot peppers. And that is a big issue for us because peppers are one of the crops that we grow enough of for the year, and that was really challenging that year because we no longer had our sweet peppers. They were all hot peppers. I have been gardening for over a decade, and I have tried so many experiments. I love to do that. I think it's really fun, and I wouldn't know about all of these different varieties or how all of these things work for me if I wouldn't have done that. So I highly recommend that you do experiments, but I'm going to go ahead and share some of the things that I've done and my results. Your results may be completely different, but this is what I have had happen whenever I did these things. So there are a lot of YouTube channels out there that give you all kinds of advice on gardening and things like that, and I have tried an awful lot of them because of course I want my gardens to look as big and beautiful as theirs. So I try and have done a lot of that, and I have found that most of that I have not had good luck, and actually my plants have done worse whenever I try some of those things. Like for example, the peppers. I know a lot of people say to top peppers, and I have had the exact opposite results with production if I do that. So I had tried this years and years ago, and I did peppers right next to each other, the exact same variety. They were the same height, everything. And the pepper that I ended up taking the tops off of, my production was probably cut in half. So last year, I started my peppers in March whenever I did my tomatoes, and they were pretty small, and I have issues with bunnies, and they came through and topped all of my peppers, and I was really upset because that means my production's going to go down. So this year, whenever I did all of my starts, and I took y'all along with me too and showed y'all how I do all of that, I started mine in February, and I think our plants look really, really good. I am super, super happy with them, and I haven't had so far any issues with the bunnies topping them. But that is one thing that I see a lot of people do that I have just had the complete opposite with my production. I have not had any luck with that. Other things, whenever I am planting in the peppers here, I am using the amendment of blood meal and eggshells. So I have found that blood meal is kind of just a good all-purpose amendment to add in. It really helps your plants, and I have done experiments with the peppers as well where I've done that. And I know a lot of people say like matchsticks, those are also good to do with the peppers. And I again did a side-by-side trial with the same type of plant. They look the same whenever I transplanted them out, and I found that the ones with the blood meal did tremendously better than the ones with just the matchstick. So those are a few of the things. Also, I don't know if I said, I also use eggshells. That is really good for like calcium, which can cause, like if you have blossom end rot, that can help with that. Some people use Tums, but I just save all of my eggshells and dehydrate them, and I find that that works just fine for me. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I think that's the main things that I've found, but I mean, it's really fun to try and experiment with different things, but I have found that sometimes your results aren't the best, especially with some of the YouTube people on there that are really, really popular. I have not had the best luck with those types of experiments. I have had better luck reading like gardening books and just, trying just the normal amendments that they have in the store. I've had a lot better luck using those things. Another thing that I do that I have found that makes a huge difference in how well our plants do is to plant based on our garden planting calendar. This is where we use the astrological signs and the moon phases to know what's best to plant when. And it happened to work out to where the most fertile days happened 3 days in a row. So I had this crazy massive planting weekend that I was so busy getting all of this planted in, everything aligned. It was an above ground day, which is the light moon phase, and the astrological sign was very fertile, so it worked out great, and I had a lot to get packed into this little planting weekend. Another thing that I like to do the day that I plant them, and if I can't get it done that day, I like to do it the next day, is to put the cages around them. Our peppers get so big that we just use what you buy at the store that they call tomato cages. Our tomatoes get so big that there's no way that's going to hold them. And last year we had some peppers get so big that it wouldn't hold them either. But I like to do it now. That way that you're not like disturbing the roots or messing up the roots. They're just put in so they don't have much established. And I've found that it's much better to do that then. And the last thing that I like to do is be sure and give them water. I am usually in a race against the storms, and even then I like to be sure and water them because you never know how much rain you're actually going to get. So I like to be sure and give them a good drink of water. That just helps a lot with the transplant shock. A little side note too, our neighbor decided to come over and visit, and while I was sitting here putting in the peppers, we have this wall of peas in the next bed over, and he is well over 6 foot tall, and I could not see him. Our peas were so tall. I thought that was really cool. Alright, I meant to do this sooner, but I totally forgot, so we're just going to start where we're at. This is where we're going to put our cherry tomatoes. Robert's already got the holes burned for it. I meant to do all the videos before, but I forgot. This is where we're going to do our paste tomatoes in the front here. He's got the holes burned there as well. And then we're going to do more cherry tomatoes here, and in the front we've already got sweet potatoes. The bunnies have been having a field day on the sweet potatoes. Hopefully they end up making it, and our peas are looking really, really good. So more cherry tomatoes here. These are going to be more like slicer tomatoes, like our black crims and jubilees and things like that. And then we have our peppers already planted. And then we have our potatoes, and I'm going to do the squashes in between. We didn't quite get the spacing right here, but I think it'll be okay. And we're going to do a few squashes. I didn't have the best germination with that, but we'll make do with what we got. So that's where we're at. We're about to start putting in all of the tomatoes, and they're looking pretty good too. And I'm just working on the raised bed garden right now. Hopefully I can get those in, and this year we are experimenting and we're going to try and grow some in ground. So we will do that probably another day, but right now we're working on the raised garden, or raised bed garden. Okay, y'all get to see us put all that in. Now we are on day 2 of this crazy planting weekend. So today we're going to get our tomatoes planted, and as you can tell, I've got me a little plan here and I'm trying to make that work. I ended up messing up, so I'm having to make notes and add things on and do things different. But we are even doing experiments with our tomatoes this year. I usually do this every year where I get some of the plants from the store that are like the transplants from the store, and I like to grow a bunch of ours from seed. But this year I'm going to pay more close attention to the plants and how they do. So we are going to grow some of the same varieties, both from the store and what we started from seed, and see what does better. So far this year, I have noticed that the ones from the store have produced a little bit earlier, I think a few weeks earlier, and that's understandable. They have a greenhouse, and I just do my plant starts inside with no artificial lights or anything like that. So that's completely understandable. But usually, at least last year, whenever I noticed this in previous years, our homegrown, or yeah, home started plants, whatever you want to call it, they do so much better towards the end of the year. And the ones that we had got from the store usually peter out a whole lot before. Like usually towards the end of August, they are done. Whereas the ones that we started usually last into the, like basically the frost. Whenever I plant out my tomatoes and I dig the hole and everything, I like to use blood meal and eggshells, just like I did with the peppers. And I forgot to mention, if y'all would like to check out our previous videos of when we started all of these plants, you can check that out. I shared and took y'all along with me whenever we did our tomato starts as well, and starting them from seed and potting them up. And I don't know, if you're really new to this, you may not know this, but you can plant tomatoes really deep. Now my raised beds aren't super deep, so I can't do this very well. But you can plant tomatoes really deep and they will just root along the stalk. But where I'm at, I have a really big issue with blight. So I like to make sure and take those bottom leaves off to where none of the leaves are touching the soil. And even if like it rains or something, if it looks like it would get weighed down at all, I try and take those off as well, because that is how blight starts. It's really, really bad where I'm at in the south. So I try and stay on top of that. Let's see, another thing I was talking before with the peppers, some of the things I have done that YouTubers say. One person, Jessica from Roots and Refuge, she said to do a whole egg in the hole where you put your tomatoes at. And I tried that and I woke up the next morning and all of my tomatoes were dug up. I was so upset. Every tomato. But the issue was we have foxes, and I guess they smelled the eggs. And of course, knowing me, I do experiment. So some of them I left whole and some of them I cracked, and it did not matter. They dug up every single tomato plant. So now I only use the eggshells. I don't use the whole tomatoes anymore, because that was a crazy experience and I had to plant all of my tomatoes twice. But luckily I caught it early enough in the morning to where it wasn't that big of an issue, but it was pretty wild. So if y'all have a lot of wildlife, you may not want to go that route. Another thing that I've tried that a lot of YouTubers suggest is to prune your tomatoes, especially like the suckers, or to have like the one stem method. I have tried this before, and of course I did side-by-side experiments, and I was shocked at how low my production was. Probably with my cherry tomatoes, it was probably more 70% less is what I got. I was really shocked by that. So I prefer just to let the plant kind of go wild, and I'll just train it and trellis it and like tie it up to the fence as best as possible. That's another thing with tomatoes is they get super big. So I don't even start my tomato plants until March, and I plant them out in May, usually around Mother's Day. But I do not start them until March. I've done that before where I started them in February, and the plants are so massive I can't fit them on the shelf. So I just do it that way. And I have also found that like the smaller tomato cages that we used with the peppers, they are nowhere near enough for how big the tomatoes get. You can use just regular fencing and like fence posts. That works well, but I prefer to use the cattle panels. It is really nice if you can afford to go that route. They are really sturdy, and you have a lot bigger holes to like reach your hand through if you have big tomatoes. That is a big benefit. I know I've had big tomatoes and used the other fencing just because it's cheaper, and sometimes it's really hard to get those tomatoes out if you have the cage all the way around them. That's another thing I've tried. I've seen some people just do like that circle cage all the way around them, and that was whenever I had the issue with getting the tomato out. I literally had to go like rung by rung out with getting it out all the way through the top, putting my hands in. So I suggest just using the one fence like row, I guess, instead of the little circular ones. Plus, you need a lot less fence post or rebar or whatever you're using. I just prefer that so much. To me, it's like a lot less material, and I think the plants are really happy doing it that way too. And it's easier to get in there and cut the bottom leaves if like, because we have the issues with blight. If you're trying to do that with the little round cages, it is really hard to stick your hands in there and get it all cut. So I really prefer just to do a row with some type of fencing. Last year, I did a lot of experiments with different varieties of tomatoes. I was growing them to see what we like as far as production and flavor and how the plants do here in the South. It is really hard on tomatoes. So we took a lot of notes and figured out which varieties we like and what we don't like. But I didn't get through all of the seeds last year. So this year, I think I got through all the ones that I didn't. There may be one or two left, but I think I got all of those, and I'm really excited to see what we like as far as flavor and production. Now we're on to paste tomatoes, and I have really struggled with them in the past. I have had a lot of issues with blossom end rot with them, and this year we're growing several different varieties, and I am so glad that I did, because the one that I thought I would like the most, I am having the most issues with. I'm not sure if it's because we have had a lot of rain or if it just doesn't do well in the South, but I am so glad that I added some variety in there, because I would have been in trouble and I probably would have not have had any paste tomatoes because the plants that I thought I would like best are struggling. So we're going to give that a try. I really got into sauces last year, so I'm hoping that that will make that even easier. Last year we just used our cherry tomatoes, which tasted delicious, but the sauce was a little runny. So we're going to try this, and hopefully we will have good success. So now we need to water all of these plants in. They were really struggling this day. This was a really hot day, and I waited towards the end of the day too, and it was just really hot. So I needed to make sure and give them some water, but it's always a good idea to do. It really helps the transplants a lot, and hopefully they won't have as much transplant shock. So this is where we're at today before we start any garden work. I'm going to show a few things in the garden I noticed. Our yarrow is starting to bloom just a little bit, and our woolly lamb's ear is starting to bloom as well with the pretty purple flowers. The sweet William does not look good anymore. And I think, oh yes, there's a couple other things. There's the lantana, and there was our perennial sunflower was starting to put out a few blossoms. They're right here. They don't look the best, but I thought there was a few more out here, but I guess not. But we got all of these tomatoes planted yesterday, and for the most part they look pretty good. The store-bought ones don't look so great, and I didn't get all of the bottom leaves off with the blight. I was waiting till I had like some alcohol to sanitize the snips, that way I don't spread that. We got all of our paste tomatoes planted here, and you can tell our peas are coming on, and look at the amount of peas. There are so many peas. I need to get out here and get that done today as well. Get all of those harvested before they get too big. I don't like them where they start to put on the pea pods, like the peas inside of there. I like it a little bit before that. They seem to get a little tough that way, so I pick them when they're a little smaller. Hopefully I haven't missed my window. And here we have like our bigger slicer tomatoes. These are our cherry tomatoes and our sweet potatoes that we've already planted. And here's our peppers. They're looking good. It looks like the bunnies actually haven't been in here, although they did get the sweet potatoes before I did all. Actually, yes, I think they have been in here. These poor sweet potatoes look so much better. Well, hopefully they'll be able to make it. And then we've got our just regular potatoes. I think these are red Pontiac on this side and Yukon Gold on the other. So that's where we're at today. And we are hopefully going to get all of the in-ground garden in. I don't know how hard this is going to be because the soil still has clay in it. So it may be pretty hard, but we've got like our post set up for our tomatoes to climb up. And we've got our cages for the peppers that I'm probably going to put in front. So that's the plan for today. Now we're on to day 3, and we are starting our in-ground garden experiment. So the first thing we need to do is get all of the holes ready for all of the plants. We're going to start with the tomatoes, and I had to laugh while we were watching this back. Robert playing with the torch, and it was so funny too because he was sitting there playing with it and the ground cover was burning in places that it shouldn't have been burning. So that was really funny. I was really dreading doing this part of the garden. We have clay soil that is really, really hard to work with. This is why we did the raised garden beds. And I just thought it would be a good idea to try and experiment now that we're a little bit more experienced with gardening. And also a few years back, we had some soil dropped off here. So there is a little bit of compost on the top in some of these areas. But oh man, after doing all of the plants for the past 2 days and now moving on to this with the clay soil, my hands were screaming. Y'all will probably see later on, I had blisters. It was not fun. So I really think I prefer the raised bed garden a lot better than doing the in-ground. And another thing, whenever I put the plants in, I ended up having to water them in for several days. Like, they had so much more transplant shock than just going into the garden beds with the nice compost soil. So I'm kind of unsure at the moment if I'm going to keep the in-ground garden, but I will say that it was a lot more work to get them put in, and they were a lot more work to get them to hold up whenever we first transplanted them. I was so determined to get all of this planting done since all of the moon phases and the astrological signs were just aligned so perfectly, but the weather was not. We were in a race against the storm, and luckily it was just a rainstorm. But when we were doing the tomatoes, it started to sprinkle a little bit, and the conditions just got worse and worse. So the weather was not aligned for this, but I was determined to get this done. So we just kept pushing through, and I'm so glad we did, because I am really bad about starting something and it taking forever to finally finish it. So I really push myself to get it finished. It's just so much easier to me. So that's what we did, but my hands really, really paid the price for that. They were in pretty bad shape for a few days. Also, in some of these video clips, you can see poor Robert, the lawnmower broke again. This poor man has more lawnmower trouble than anyone I have ever seen before. I cannot tell you how many hours hours he has spent just this year alone trying to get this lawnmower working, and it just keeps breaking. So hopefully he will finally get it fixed and it will not be any trouble. But over the years, he has spent countless hours. I'm to the point to telling him I think he's cursed with lawnmowers. He has so much trouble. Now that we finally got all of the plants planted, I'm going to add the tomato cages to the peppers. And we're just going to do a long row of fence here for the tomatoes. We thought about waiting on this because it's kind of dangerous to be doing this in the rain, but I was really wanting to get it all sorted because as they grow bigger, they start falling over. Plus the storms were coming and I didn't want that to break them. So we were trying to get this up so the tomatoes don't break or have any issues. And we also had to do a little readjusting, making sure we missed all the water lines. That would have been horrible to get that. So we put it a little further in than I would have liked, but I would much rather do that than have to replace water lines. So that's what we ended up doing there. And I was so happy that we got all of this done, even though we're doing it in the rain. It just kind of makes it fun. It's, to me anyways, it's like a good story. So we finally got it all sorted. That got me to thinking, and we have so many funny stories to tell. Our kids have funny stories and memories of the things mom and dad did. So y'all be sure and subscribe because we're going to be sharing some of our funny stories. And after all of that, the last thing I have to do is get the garden watered. I'm doing this even though it's raining, and I'm really glad I did because these plants struggled so much with transplant shock. So even though we got rain, I'm glad I did that, and that's why I suggest it because they do a lot better with whenever you water them right away. Now we're on to yet another day, and this day is nothing but fun. We don't have to do any hard work. All we're doing is adding in some pretty little things. I love to add in these garden flags. I just get mine at the Dollar Tree, and it's really fun because you get like different patterns and stuff every year, and they are really cheap, but that is one of my favorite things to add in. I love the little garden flags, and I think it adds another little element into the garden. Okay, here's where we're at with the garden. After this crazy planting weekend, we got our in-ground garden. This is a new garden we're just trying to do. We've got our tomatoes and peppers there, and a lot of these are the same varieties that I have in the raised bed. We're kind of doing like a little trial to see how well they do compared to the ones in the raised bed. We've got our flower garden. We've got our peas, which are so big and so pretty. I just love them. We've got our flags up, and we also have cherry tomatoes here. I have a video where I went over all the different varieties of tomatoes and peppers and things like that that we're growing this year, if you'd like to check that out. This is our paste tomatoes here. I also have some Amish pie pumpkins on this arbor here and this arbor here, and I hope they grow up really tall over the arbor and look really pretty. And look how tall these peas are. They are so big. And in this bed we have more cherry tomatoes, and I also have sweet potatoes in the front here. The bunnies have been having fun eating those, so hopefully they do okay. And here we have like our big slicer tomatoes. So that's what we have there, and more peas. And we also have our peppers, and also we have sweet potatoes. I have found that these are a great companion plant. So over the weekend, and oh yeah, we got our potatoes here. And in between the potatoes, I put different squashes. I wanted to have more of these winter squash, like the Long Island cheese pumpkins, but I didn't have the best germination, so we have some of those, and I think some lemon squash too. That's more of a summer squash. So we have that in there, and we got our peppers, and I think that's pretty much it. I did not get absolutely everything planted like I wanted. I still have to figure out if I'm going to be able to do corn and beans, and I did not get my okra planted. My plan is to put the okra, I'll show you where I usually put it, and I got a new variety from Baker Creek that I'm really excited about this year. So my plan is to put the okra here. So that's what I was thinking there. And our flowers are getting so tall. I can't believe how big they're getting. They look so nice. But this is where we're at. It was such a big feat to get all of those plants planted. this weekend, and it was so nice to get all of them in. I ended up with a few extras. I think I'm just going to give them to friends and see if they want them. But this is where we're at. This is the garden so far. So thank y'all all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That way y'all can check out hopefully good harvest videos. And I'm going to share some of the things that we do with our tomatoes and peppers and things like that. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye.